"Excuse me, but are you blind?" I gathered my courage and asked the woman who had requested me several times. She gripped her white cane tightly, raised her face, and looked at me. Our eyes met in the rearview mirror of the car, and I was convinced. Yes, I was captivated by her eyes, which looked straight at me as if I was being drawn in. "My name is Brian Matthews, 26 years old. I'm a taxi driver. After graduating from college, I immediately became a company employee, but I couldn't achieve good sales results. On top of that, I gradually felt it was painful to be obsessed with winning and losing, so I quit the company. I endured it to the limit and continued working for the company for 4 years. Without thinking about what would happen next, I just quit. I managed to live with a little savings, but I couldn't stay unemployed at 26. I gotta find a job. What kind of work should I do next? I bought a job magazine and mumbled to myself while staring at it absent-mindedly at home. I didn't have any special skills or qualifications. There was nothing I could proudly boast of as a hobby. On my days off, I would just go for a drive. While thinking about these things, I found a job listing for a taxi driver. A driver, huh? Saying that, I got up from the bed where I had been lying and took out the resume I had bought along with the job magazine. I thought I would go for an interview with what interested me first. When I called the number in the recruitment ad, they said they wanted to interview me the next day. I finished writing my resume, went to take an ID photo, and prepared. I put on the suit I was used to wearing every day for the first time in 2 months. It felt like a long time, even though it had only been 2 months. I arrived at the taxi company 10 minutes before the appointed time, opened the door, and spoke to a woman who seemed to be a clerk. "Excuse me, my name is Brian Matthews. I'm here for an interview today." When I spoke, the woman urged me to sit in a nearby chair and went to call someone. After waiting for a few minutes, a man in a suit called out to me. "Hey there. So you're Brian, right?" He spoke cheerfully. I stood up from the chair, feeling a bit nervous, and said, Yes, I'm Brian Matthews. Nice to meet you," trying to sound serious and a bit tense. "Ah, I see. Please have a seat. Do you have your resume with you?" When he asked that, I took out my resume from my bag and handed it to him. Hum. He seemed like a naturally cheerful person. Even while just looking at the resume, he didn't go silent, but made sounds like hum and oh while checking the content. "You quit a good company, even though you had a great job? What a waste." Why? Though his friendly way of speaking couldn't be described as that of an interviewer, it eased my tension considerably. The reason is that I got tired of conflicts and advancing by someone else's mistakes. I answered, feeling that today's interview might be a failure. "I see, working at a company can be tough. Actually, working itself is tough in this world." Saying this, the manager sighed a little as if it were his own matter. I could only give a wry smile, unable to say anything. "By the way, did you know that you need more than a regular license to be a taxi driver?" he asked, and I made a surprised face. "You need a hack license. If you plan to work long-term, we can offer some financial support, though not fully. You can probably get it in about a month. By the way, why do you want to be a taxi driver?" I was calculating the costs in my head. I would be unemployed for another month and have to get the license. The manager looked at me, waiting for my answer. "Oh, sorry. I wanted to be a driver because, when I was a kid, the driver told us a lot about tourist spots during a family trip. I thought it was amazing. I like talking to people, so I want to show off the good places in my hometown. My hometown is a bit of a tourist spot. My sister and her husband live with our parents, so I started living alone right after graduating from college." "Is that so? People who know a lot about drivers. I'm not a driver myself, so I don't know much though." Answering a question I hadn't asked, the manager laughed at his own comment. I thought he was a really cheerful person. After that, I was told that once I obtained the hack license, I could work as a driver. Thanks to the manager's arrangement, I was able to do miscellaneous tasks in the office, clean cars, and handle clerical work while working towards getting my license. Thanks to that, it seemed I wouldn't have to use up all my savings. During the day, I worked at a taxi company, and after finishing work on time, I attended driving school. Even after a month of attending, I still hadn't obtained my license. It's understandable since I had to juggle work during the day and driving lessons in my limited free time. I was eager to start working as a taxi driver as soon as possible. One day after work, I was heading home leisurely since I didn't have any lessons that day, and I saw a woman collapsed on the roadside in front of me. I quickly ran over to her and called out, "Are you okay?" I reached out my hand, but the woman didn't try to grab it. She was a slightly chubby woman. She was looking down, brushing off her dirty knees, and then she turned to look at me. It seemed our eyes met perfectly, but she quickly turned away and picked up her glasses that had fallen. Seeing the white cane at her feet, I realized she was visually impaired. I picked up the cane and tried to hand it to her, but she let out a small beep when I touched her hand. "I'm sorry for grabbing your hand without permission. I picked up your cane and wanted to give it to you," I said. It was clearly inappropriate to touch a woman my age without permission, no matter the situation. Reflecting on it later, I felt sorry and decided to speak clearly this time. "I have your cane. Is it okay if I hand it to you?" I said. The woman nodded slightly. I then handed her the cane. "Thank you," she said softly and walked away slowly without looking back. The next day at work, I noticed my name tag, which I always kept in my bag, was missing. I emptied my bag and searched thoroughly, but it was nowhere to be found. The supervisor saw me dumping out my belongings in the men's locker room and asked, "Hey, what's up? Did you lose something?" I replied clearly, "I can't find my name tag. I might have dropped it somewhere." As I was about to check my thoroughly searched bag once again, the supervisor said, "Well, you can't help it. Ask the office staff to make a new one." I replied, "Got it," without much enthusiasm. The office staff grumbled about the extra work, but made a new name tag for me, and I started my work that day. A little over 2 months after I started working at the taxi company, I finally obtained my hack license. Now I could finally work as a taxi driver. I was excited about starting something new. On my first day of driving on the road, the supervisor arranged for me to handle only dispatch requests. Waiting on the roadside can be tough for first-timers. For now, you can gradually get used to driving by handling dispatch requests. Oh, and here's this. Stick it on a visible spot in the car. What he handed me was a name tag with my photo on it. After a while, the phone rang. It was my first job, my first customer. There were many restaurants and commercial facilities around the tourist area, so taxi requests were relatively frequent. "All right, Brian, do your best. You might be nervous for your first time, but treat the customers politely," the supervisor said, giving my shoulder a reassuring push. "Okay, I'm off," I said. For this day, I had memorized the surrounding roads, shortcuts, and back streets thoroughly. I also made a list of my recommended places and wrote them down in a notebook so I could introduce them anytime. I gripped the notebook and my new name tag and eagerly got into the car. On the first day, I was exhausted mostly from nerves and mental fatigue. As the days went by, I gradually got used to the job as a driver and stopped getting nervous. About 2 months later, I got a call on the radio while driving in the city. "Hello, Brian. We have a reservation for a pickup. You're the closest. Can you go?" I had just dropped off a customer, so the timing was perfect. "Yes, I can. I'll head there now." Normally, the dispatcher would end the call there, but today he continued. "Also, the customer is visually impaired, so please take care." I felt a bit nervous since this was different from my usual tasks. When I arrived at the location, I got out of the car and pressed the intercom at the entrance. A young-sounding voice answered, "Yes? Thank you for your call. This is the taxi you requested." A voice responded from the intercom. "Thank you. I'll be right out." A few minutes after she ended the intercom call, the front door opened with a click. A woman with a white cane came out. I was a bit concerned that she opened the door just trusting the voice on the intercom, considering she lived alone. But she didn't seem suspicious. "Please," she said, extending her cane. "All right, this way." I pointed to the car, but then realized she couldn't see my gesture. Quickly, I corrected myself. "Please put your hand on my shoulder or arm. I'll guide you." She hesitated, but then placed her hand on my arm and followed me to the car, using her cane with the other hand. After ensuring the woman got into the car, I spoke to her. "I'll close the door now," I said, then gently closed the door. I got into the driver's seat and asked her where she was headed. "To the shopping mall in the next city," she replied. "Got it," I said, and then pressed the accelerator to head towards the destination. Customers vary. Some like to talk, some prefer silence, some work or make calls in the car. After exchanging the first few words, I usually try to gauge if the person wants to chat. Usually, I would start a conversation by talking about the scenery or the crowd outside, but she couldn't see. This is tricky. Thinking that, I decided to just focus on driving quietly. Then she spoke up. "Have you been a taxi driver for long?" Surprised, I glanced at her through the rearview mirror and answered, "No, I started this job just 2 months ago. If there's anything uncomfortable, please let me know," I answered politely, paying close attention to my driving to ensure it was safe. I wondered if there was something uncomfortable about the ride. I started to feel a bit worried. She reassured me, "No, it's fine. It feels like you're driving safely. The ride is comfortable." Hearing that, I felt a bit relieved. I thought maybe she wanted someone to talk to, so I started a conversation. I used to work as a salesperson. Competing and trying to outperform others became exhausting. So, I quit and decided to try a completely different job, becoming a taxi driver. I doubted she would be interested in my story, but it was a way to start a conversation. "I see. Salespeople have quotas, right? That must be tough." I work from home because of my condition. We continued talking about different jobs and interests until we arrived at the destination. "We've arrived. Thank you for using our service." I told her the fare, and she handed me a taxi voucher. As she was getting out of the car, she asked, "Can I ask your name?" In my 2 months on the job, this was the first time a customer asked my name, and I was a bit flustered. I worried about making a mistake and being called out by the company for it. With this anxiety, I introduced myself to the woman. "My name is Matthews. Brian Matthews." When she heard my name, she thanked me and got out of the taxi. At the end of my shift that day, I went to work the next day, concerned that I might hear something about being asked my name the previous day. Feeling nervous, I realized how small-minded I was, but I was relieved that the woman hadn't reported anything. I continued my regular work, and a week after I had driven the woman, I received a radio message that someone had specifically requested me. "Brian, you've been requested. The customer's name is Emily Jenkins. Please be polite." "Oh, and it seems she's visually impaired." Hearing this, I immediately remembered the woman I had driven the same day last week. "Understood. I'm heading there now." I thought it was unusual for a taxi driver to be requested, but I headed to the woman's house. When I arrived, I got out of the car and rang the intercom, just like last time, to inform her that the taxi had arrived. "I'm here to pick you up." When I spoke through the intercom, the woman opened the door and came out. "Thank you for choosing our service, Ms. Jenkins." I offered my arm for her to hold. "Thank you." As if she had seen me offering my arm, Emily placed her hand on it. "Let's go to the car." I didn't feel anything unusual about this. I was just repeating my previous actions. Once she got into the car, Emily directed me to a different location than last time. "Understood." Confirming the request, I started the car. "Thank you for requesting me. Are you meeting someone today?" I asked her. "Oh no. Why do you ask?" Surprised, Emily responded with a question. "Oh, I apologize. I just thought you looked very nice, so I wondered if you were going on a date." "Is it inappropriate to ask such things nowadays?" I asked, concerned about compliance. "Ah, You mean harassment? Oh, sorry. I didn't feel harassed at all. Breaking into a cold sweat, I apologized to Emily. Harassment? I see, you're right. It's inappropriate for an unknown man to comment on a woman's attire. My apologies. I hastily apologized to Emily. It's okay. I didn't mind at all. Working from home, I sometimes want to go out for a change of pace. So, I decided to make Wednesdays my self-care day and dress up to go out. Hearing this, I looked at Emily through the rearview mirror. She seemed to sense something and continued speaking. How can you do it even though you can't see? You must be wondering. Feeling as if she had seen right through me, I hurriedly denied it, embarrassed. No, not at all. However, I couldn't find a good comeback and ended up mumbling. I have a helper come once a week. During that time, they hang my clothes on the hangers with braille labels. That's how I distinguish them. Makeup is a bit too difficult, though. Saying this, Emily lowered her face a little. I see. It must be tough emotionally to just work at home all the time. What kind of work do you do? When I asked this, she mimicked typing on a computer with her hands. I do transcription on my computer. We continued chatting about trivial things. Having been requested as her driver several times, my perception of her shifted from just a customer to a familiar acquaintance. Maybe that's why I occasionally started mentioning the scenery while driving. Despite this, Emily always talked as if she could see the same scenery I was seeing. In those moments, I would forget she couldn't see, but after dropping her off at her destination, I would remember the oddity. One day, this happened again. That day, I had been requested as her driver and was taking Emily to her destination. On the way, we passed by a new crepe shop, the first of its kind in the area. Seeing the long lines of young people and families, I got a bit excited and started talking. Wow, look at that. It's a popular crepe shop, and even though it's a weekday, there's a huge line. I'd like to try it too, but maybe after the crowd dies down a bit. As soon as I said that, I remembered that Emily couldn't see the scene and was about to correct myself when she spoke first. You're right. That crepe shop does have a long line. She looked out the window with an expression of surprise and longing. Seeing this through the rearview mirror, the feeling of unease I had turned into certainty. If my suspicion was correct, I couldn't understand why Emily would do this. Even though it had nothing to do with me, I couldn't help but ask, Emily, can you actually see? I directed my suspicion at her. The smile on her face quickly turned serious, and she looked down for a few seconds. Then, with a determined look, she raised her head and answered my question. Yes, Emily only said that. Why? I mean, it's none of my business, but why pretend you can't see? Is there a reason? Emily remained silent at my question. Thinking there must be a reason for her pretending, I decided not to press further. However, this time, Emily started speaking. Can we just keep driving for a bit? Her face was serious as she said this. But what about your destination? Is it okay to just drive? I almost mentioned the cost, but stopped myself. I'll pay for the extra time, she said. With that, I nodded without saying anything. I drove aimlessly, with Emily remaining silent. The atmosphere in the car was tense and heavy. As I was thinking about changing the topic, Emily spoke up. Earlier you asked if there was a reason, right? I nodded in response. I've always had this chubby body. It was fine when I was a kid. People would say I was cute, all round and chubby. But that was because I was a child. When I got to middle school, the other girls started worrying about diets and their figures. I tried dieting too, but my parents were happy to see me eat a lot, so they'd prepare delicious meals every night. I couldn't tell them I was on a diet, so I kept eating. My friends got prettier, but I kept getting bigger. Eventually, I became ashamed of my body. Walking with my thin friends, people would help them if they had trouble, but they'd ignore me. I experienced this so many times that I lost confidence in myself. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she recalled her past. Then, one day, I saw a TV drama where a character, who was blind and had a similar body to mine, fell and was in trouble. I thought maybe people would help someone like that, and I wouldn't have to worry about people's stares. It's wrong, but I started pretending to be blind. She took out a handkerchief from her bag, wiped her tears, and then pulled out something else. Holding it in her hand, she began to speak as if recalling a memory. "Do you remember this name tag?" She showed it to me through the rearview mirror. "Wait, that's my old name tag. How do you have it, Emily?" Emily looked sad as she began to explain. "You dropped it when you helped me in front of your company a while ago. I wanted to return it many times, but I couldn't, and I've kept it all this time. I'm sorry." I tilted my head, unable to remember. "Did I help you, Emily?" When was that?" I asked Emily, clearly puzzled, trying to recall the event. "It was about 2 months ago. I fell, and you ran over to help me." Slowly, the memory came back to me. "Oh right, that was on my way back from an interview, wasn't it?" Emily looked at the name tag, reminiscing and smiling to herself. At that moment, I realized people are kind to those who seem vulnerable. But seeing your serious face, I felt ashamed for testing people. "When I saw you coming out of the taxi company, I figured you must be a driver. I always wanted to tell you the truth and apologize. Spending time with you pretending to be blind was enjoyable, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. I'm sorry." Emily kept muttering, "I'm sorry," while nodding her head. "Well," I mumbled without thinking about how to respond. Emily misunderstood my reaction and kept apologizing. "No, I'm not blaming you. I get it. Wanting to avoid people's judgment is something everyone feels. Even I used to struggle with competition and wanting to be better than others. But pretending to be blind, that's different. From today, stop pretending and have confidence in yourself. I used to think I had to become a company employee after college, but now I enjoy being a driver. I hope you find your own path too." Just then, we arrived at the initial destination. Emily put her white cane back into her bag and stepped out of the car on her own. "Thank you. I feel so much better after talking about my feelings. I'm going to take another look at myself." Her face was full of smiles. The following week, there was no request from Emily. She'd been requesting my service regularly, so it must be because I saw through her lie. She probably didn't want to ride in my car anymore. What had become a weekly routine was now absent, and it made me feel very lonely. Another week passed without a request, and I started to think I'd never see her again. Even though I felt disappointed, I continued my daily taxi work. About 6 months later, the dispatcher called me over the radio with a pickup request. "Brian, there's a pickup request. It's from Ms. Jenkins. Please handle it." Hearing this, my heart skipped a beat. "Understood," I replied calmly over the radio. "Emily, could it really be her? Why would she request me after all this time?" I found her actions puzzling. Following the familiar route, I headed to Emily's house. I arrived and pressed the intercom as usual. "Hello." A bright, cheerful voice came through the intercom. "I'm the taxi you requested." I responded as I always did. "I'll be right out." The intercom clicked off. After a minute or two, the front door opened, and a woman stepped out. She didn't have a white cane. "Thank you." The woman who answered was not the Emily I knew. She had slender legs, long white hands, and her hair was shiny and radiant. Her face was full of confidence, and she smiled brightly at me. "Emily?" I called out, my heart pounding at the sight of this transformed woman. "Yes, it's Emily. Since then, I've apologized to everyone I deceived and told them the truth. Instead of hiding myself, I've spent the past 6 months working hard to lose weight so I could confidently be myself. As my body became lighter, my heart did too. I started enjoying fashion and even welcomed the attention I received from others." Smiling warmly, she shared her story with me. "Let's go," she said cheerfully. Emily quickly walked towards the car. Still trying to fully grasp the situation, I jogged to catch up. Once inside, Emily gave me a destination. "I'd like to go to that crepe shop." the popular crepe shop that had just opened in the area. Even after 6 months, the lines were still long. Understood, I replied and started driving. Emily's face remained cheerful as we drove. As we approached the crepe shop, her expression grew serious, and she pulled something out of her bag. "Brian, I want to return this name tag to you." She handed me the name tag I had dropped when I helped her. I took my hand off the wheel for a moment to accept it. "Thank you," I said, and she began to speak. "After you found out about my lie 6 months ago, I felt relieved. I realized I couldn't keep up such a charade forever and needed someone to call me out. You told me to find something I wanted to do, and I did. My goal was to regain my confidence and invite you to the crepe shop." Her sudden confession took me by surprise. "Confession?" Emily blushed and looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Since you helped me the first time, I've been interested in you. Would you like to join me for crepes?" she asked with earnest eyes, looking straight at me. Oh wow. Surprised by her words, I quickly pulled over to the side of the road. What should I do? I can't," I stammered. Emily's face turned sad as she replied, "Yeah, I understand." Seeing her look down, I quickly waved my hands. "Oh no, I can't right now because I'm at work, but I'm off the day after tomorrow." "How about then? Also, could we exchange contact information?" I took out my phone and turned to face her. "Yes, definitely," she said, pulling out her phone too. A small beginning can be crucial, and that feeling always reaches someone. We exchanged contact information and made plans for the day after tomorrow. I felt a pleasant thrill in my heart, sensing that something new was about to start.